So yeah, we can listen to the teaching, or we could just listen to the manifestations, and we pretty much just covered 85% of it. So that's good. But the difference is, I don't know if we were listening as intently to the details, not knowing exactly what the teaching was going to be on as I was. But he pretty much just rocked that. So, yay there.
God rocks.
You pretty much yeah, Kaylee, you're on the camera. Oh, so today we're going to hit on a fairly common topic, but while I was reading, or better yet, while we were doing the intro class, I started noticing some interesting similarities in a specific word, but we'll get to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and if you guys want to go to Matthew, we're going to spend a good long amount of time in Matthew. Yeah, there's a lot of Matthew in this teaching. But while you guys are going there, it'll eventually be Matthew 17. But we're going to focus on this concept of faith. Okay? Now, faith is something that we hear a lot. Some of us know that faith is the same word as believing. Some of us don't. It is. But something that's interesting that happens is within the Bible, they actually begin to get less and less descriptive about faith as you get further and further into the New Testament, and you start to see that faith was taught primarily in the Gospels and in the first couple of doctrinal pieces, and then it's just assumed that they understand what it means in the future. Okay, they kind of stop describing it and more would just start talking about having it. But what's the point in faith? We're going to read one of many, many instances real quick that kind of alludes to what happens when you don't have faith. What happens when you don't have believing? So let's go to Matthew 17, 14 through 20. And John, if you would be willing to read that for us.
I am willing.
Thank you.
I have to get there. I thought you said 15.
Oh, my apologies. 17, 14, 20.
And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is lunatic and sore vexed. For ofttimes he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, and said, Why could we not cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you.
So if we look at it, that's a lot of power if we have faith. Okay, the ability to physically take a mountain and put it into the sea is pretty impressive. Or in this case, to just remove hence to yonder place. Okay, sure, whether it's in a sea or just Arvada, wherever we want to go. But you'll see here that even the most devout of followers of Jesus were struggling with faith. And that's what we're going to focus on here, is what exactly is it that stops us from believing? What are the common things that we struggle with when it comes to that belief within the Bible? Because God was nice enough to point out directly in there basically 4 of the most common scenarios that people start to have unbelief about. Before we get though, we'll do a little bit of background knowledge. So the word faith is the word pistis. Okay, pretty much whenever they talk about faith or believing, it's some derivative of that. Pistos is the adjective. there's a couple derivations, but it all comes from the stem word pistis. And pistis has 4 primary definitions. One is, or I should say 2. One is to be trusty or faithful, which means a person who shows themselves faithful in transaction of business, the execution of command, or the discharge of official duties, which is interesting. And then the one that we're more commonly going to look at here is being persuaded, believing, confiding, or trusting, or in the New Testament, one who trusts in God's promises. And I think that that's the most pinnacle circumstance for faith, is the ability to actually trust in God's promises. So, obviously, if faith is to trust in God's promises, what's something that we would actually need to know?
God's promises.
Yeah, what God's promises are. There they go. It's like it's in the definition. Oh man, the obvious is difficult sometimes. So if we could have someone go to Acts 20:32.
Acts 20.
Yeah, so if you guys want to go there.
32.
Acts 20:32. Keely, did you bring me a phone? Cool. Acts 20:32 in the ESV says, and now I commend you to, do you have ESV?
I have ESV.
Score, read it.
And now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you the inheritance among all those who are sanctified.
Okay, so God has already given us an inheritance. Seeing that we just did the intro class, we all know that by becoming children of God, by accepting Jesus Christ as our Savior, we have power today. It's not that Kaylee has to wait until we all pass away for us to give her any comfort or care in the world. All right, that's not how it works. Just by being our daughter, she's naturally allowed to do things. She has liberties to get food out of the fridge. She has liberties to run them up, usually. So she has these different things that she's already been given just by being a daughter to me and Taylor. Same thing happens for us and God. Okay, we have powers just by existing. So that's all fine and dandy, but even when I know, or where is it? Yeah. Okay, so that's all great, but the problem is, not a problem.
There's delicious cider donuts.
There's cider donuts and cider itself. But the problem is sometimes even though we know what the promises are, sometimes even though we know that we have that power, we know that we can expect healing, we know that we can do amazing things, we know that we can theoretically move mountains. Okay, I don't think I've ever been in an instance where I really needed to, but we have that power that God will give us. The problem is in a lot of circumstances, we start to tell ourselves we don't have those powers, and we start to waver in our believing. And that's where we get to now. So background knowledge done. Let's go to Matthew 6:30. Now, we're going to find the first of 4 instances in Matthew of a word that is pronounced iligo pisto. Okay? And what that is that is the word little believing or a small degree of believing. And that happens 4 times in here. And that's what the significance of this teaching is. So if someone, Tristan, are you there? If you would read Matthew 6:30.
I have the King James version.
That's fine.
Wherefore, if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow casts the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith?
There we see it. O ye of little faith. And that's how it's translated. Okay, you who has a small degree of faith. But that was taken out of context because that didn't tell us much. It just specifically said that they were worried about clothing and stuff, and God made flowers prettier already, so why wouldn't he make you comfortable? Okay, general paraphrasing. But we're going to look at it in context with a little bit more accurate representation. So Tristan, could you read starting at 24 to 34?
No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. It is not the life more than meat, and the body more than raiment. Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these.
Yeah, sorry, so it's 10.
Wherefore, if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye little faith? Therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or wherewith all shall we be clothed?
It's probably good, actually. Okay, so we see here in 25, take no thought for your life. We see later in 27, which of ye by taking thought can add 1 cubit to one stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Continuing on past where we were, therefore take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? Take therefore no thought for tomorrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. That's the very first thing that we start to run into in terms of a roadblock or an obstacle in our believing, is what they call here thought. When we translate that to a more simple definition for us, it's the word merimno. I don't know, strange Greek word. We'll go with that. But what it means is to be anxious or troubled with cares. Okay? So when we start to sit there and become concerned about what we're going to do, or we're spending our thoughts focusing on all the different little things in life, or what we're going to have to eat, or the bills, or whether we're tall enough, and that whole idea of who by thought can add any cubit to their stature, our anxiousness and our worry is only detracting from our understanding of God. If instead of focusing on how we're going to do it, we focus on the promises of God and what he's already promised to do for us, then we're changing our perspective, which will allow us to actually have believing more strongly. There's a lot of instances in which you'll see different scenarios for this. But in this one specifically, it's talking about the idea of being anxious about provisions, okay? They talk about this idea that we are worried about food and clothes is what they were saying. But if we look at it, Jehovah, Jireh, is one of the names that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, which specifically means I am your provision, or I am your provider. So why are we looking for provision somewhere else in the world? Why are we concerned about that? Okay? Even back in the Old Testament with Elisha, God was still giving us the power to take small amounts of food and make them larger. He has a scenario in 2 Kings where it talks about the idea that he had 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain and managed to feed hundreds of men with it. Okay? Later in the New Testament, Jesus does the same thing with bread. We don't need to worry about that. I forgot who it is, but one of the prophets even has birds delivering him food.
Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah. Like, how much simpler can it get than that? Like, God's going to figure it out. We just need to trust that he will.
It could fall from the sky in the desert.
It could. It could. We have also the instances of Elisha with the woman who lost her husband and the pot of oil. So the idea that she had like no oil and she was just going to burn it and then die. And that's what she accepted. That was her plan, her brilliant final climactic outing. But instead he came there and was like, no, you're going to take it, you're going to fill it, and you're going to go share it and sell it. So she ended up basically making all the money back. Why? Because she didn't care about the thought of what she was going to have. She assumed that God would provide it. Let's go to Philippians 4:6 real quick and wrap that up. This is an 8-page teaching, so I'm cutting sections of it out. The parts of it seem moderately vague. Okay, so Philippians 4:6, and Andrew, once you get there, if you read that for us.
Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses, 7 as well?
Sure.
Yeah. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
Great. So right there, you're reading which version?
ESV.
ESV, it changes, be careful to be anxious for nothing. It's a specific commandment given to us by God. And the promise is, but in prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let every request be known unto God. All right? He's given us instructions as to what to do in these circumstances. So instead of taking our own individual worldly solutions, let's accept the one that's already been given to us. So that's pitfall number 1. The first thing we need to do is renew our mind from when we are anxious or worrying. The next instance of this comes in Matthew 8:26. So let's go there. And John, you've been a good Matthew reader. So actually, we're going to go Matthew 8:23 through 27. Don't worry, we have like 5 more. It's okay. We got this Matthew thing. Whenever you're ready, John.
And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves. But he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he saith unto them, Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled and said, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?
Okay, good. So, again, we saw our lovely phrase, O ye of little faith. And what is it right here that he's chastising them for? It's not thought, but what is it that they did that caused them unbelief? Fear. Okay? So we have anxiousness or worry. We have legitimate fear is the next thing that we need to worry about. But there's a lot of instances where God specifically tells us not to be fearful. We've been given these commandments. In Joshua 1:9, it says, Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Okay? That was said right before the Battle of Jericho. They rocked that stuff. They didn't have to worry about it. Okay? They should have been afraid, but he wasn't. We then have Elijah in 2 Kings 1:15. And it states, And the angel of the Lord said unto Elijah, Go down with him, be not afraid of him. And he arose and went down with him unto the king. Okay, once again, he said, Be not afraid. All right. Now, this is a really interesting scenario because out of all the things that Elijah should have been afraid for, it wouldn't have been this time because he had just gotten done raining down fire upon over 100 opposing troops. Okay? But even knowing the power of God, even knowing that God's there supporting him, even having performed miracles already, there's still fear that God saw within him and knew that he needed to continue to reinforce that statement of do not be afraid. He then went on to confront the king. The king died. All is well. When God told Moses to tell the people to not fear in Exodus 14:13, it was a commandment that he specifically stated. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. Okay? Over and over and over again, God is telling these people not to fear. And right now, these aren't even the children of God. Okay? This is just God saying, I got you. Like, I will cover this. But today, we have so much more than that. Today, we actually have a spirit within us that is not of fear. In 2 Timothy 1:7 and 8, it says, For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So back in the day, God was still telling them not to be afraid, just on the assumption God would take care of them. Not only do we have God taking care of us, but now we have a spirit that can actually manifest perfect love, which casteth out fear. So why do we have to be afraid of anything in this world? And if we do start to find ourselves afraid, why don't we rely upon the power inside of ourselves that we know we have to cast that out, to get rid of that fear? So that's our second one, okay? 2 major pitfalls. First one, being anxious and worried. Second one, being fearful. And now we will go to Matthew 14, 26 through 31. And Tristan, just so we can be fair about this whole Matthew splitting scenario, if you would read that for us. 26 through 31 in Matthew 14.
And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and they cried out of fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me.
Okay. So, do we have ye of little faith in that one?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, thou of little faith. It changes a little bit. So what was the catalyst for unbelief here? It wasn't anxiousness. It wasn't worry. It was doubt. Okay. It was specifically doubt. It says basically don't be afraid of it. So it talks about fear. But then specifically afterwards, he says, Wherefore didst thou doubt? So what was it that made you start to doubt? And that's what started going wrong. Now the word doubt is actually really interesting. I had no idea about this when I started this. Have any of you guys done a word study on that ever? On doubt. It's distazo. And what it means is it comes from dis, which is to or to double, and stasis, which is stance or standing. So really what it means is to waver back and forth, to vacillate between two things. So even though in this, Peter had the understanding and the belief that God could do it, he started to waver and look to the world, which was the waves, that changed his believing. All right? A lot of times we have choices to make, and we have decisions that we can make in the world, and we can either look to God or we can look to the world. But when we start to do that just by turning away from God for a single second to look at what the worldly view is, we start to waver. We get what we call doubt, okay, or what they consider doubt. Let's go to James 1. And then Janelle, if you would read James 1, 6 through 8.
Sure.
You got your pretzel stick there, Kaylee?
Sorry, where are we going?
James 1, 6 through 8.
But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways.
Okay, so right here we see, without specifically using the word doubt, a section of the Bible that's talking directly about somebody who is doubting. It's somebody who is wavering. It's interesting because as you start to look further into this concept of unbelief and a lack of believing, there's constantly references to the sea and to waves and to ships, because it really has the same concepts within it. There's metaphors within the Bible to discuss your ship as being your faith or your ship as being God. And when you start to pay attention to that around you, which is the sea, you start to run into these problems. Now, this was also substantial culturally based upon the strength of the god of the sea back in Roman and Greek cultures. So it makes sense that they're starting to use these. Nonetheless, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So not only is this going to affect your faith if you continue to look back and forth between what God is stating and what the world is telling you, but also it's going to affect it in other areas. We know the promises that we have, so we need to be firm within that. We cannot get what we desire if we don't believe it will happen. Look at the Israelites. They didn't believe that they could take Canaan, so they were not able to. Okay? Sarah didn't believe that she could actually get pregnant, and in fact laughed at God's promise. So instead, she told Abraham to sleep with her maid. Are you really going to get pregnant if you tell your husband to go sleep with someone else? Okay? Just on a any given basis, that's not going to happen. So, it wasn't until she stopped doubting God and started believing what he said that she actually had a child. In Hebrews 11:11, it says, through faith, also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age because she judged him faithful who had promised. So it wasn't until she actually started walking in faith and believing that she could actually attain what God had promised. All right. Let's go back to Matthew. We're going to go to 21:21. And Taylor, seeing that the small child is not bothering you at this juncture.
Yeah.
If you want to read that one for us.
Matthew 21.
Yep, 21:21.
She knew. Yeah, he goes first. Okay, 21:21. And Jesus answered them, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, it will happen. And whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith.
Okay. So right here we specifically see that one of the contingencies to actually walking forward on the promises of God and manifesting the power that he's given us is that we shall have no doubt. Verily I say unto thee, if ye have faith, not, ye shall not only do this, which a miracle involving a fig tree, but you can also move mountains. All right? So we've hit three of the major pitfalls, and they all seem similar, but they have slightly different caveats. One is worrying, okay? So trying to find our own man-made solutions. The other one is fear. Did I skip one? Yep, no. Fear. So actually being afraid of things and unwilling to do them. The next one is simply wavering, looking back and forth and looking away from God's solution to try to find different ones. And that brings us to our final concern for this teaching, which is in Matthew 16, 5 through 12. And John will let you read that one if you're willing.
And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said unto them, take heed, and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand, neither remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up? How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that ye should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees.
Okay. So this is actually a really funny instance if you think about it in perspective of what just happened. But once again, O ye of little faith, and what is the catalyst? Would you read real quick for me verse 8?
Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves?
Okay, right there. Why reason ye among yourselves? Okay. So now we have basically a reiteration of doubt, but more specifically a misunderstanding of it. Whenever we, as men and women of this earth, start to look at problems, we always look at it, or I shouldn't say we always, we tend to look at it first from our knowledge of earthly scenarios. So here, God basically, or Jesus, my apologies, says, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So he's obviously using a metaphor to talk about the faith and the doctrine of the Pharisees. But instead, the people immediately turn to this idea of being like, we should have bought bread. That's what we forgot on the ship. We're going to starve. Jesus, why didn't you remind us to bring the bread? And he's like, you guys, not only is that not an issue, like you saw what I did with breadcrumbs. We fed thousands of people, but I'm not talking about real bread. Like really, get your minds around it. How long have you been with me? We've gone through parables. But that was their first inclination. The instant they heard leaven, they were like, bread, we need food. Okay? It wasn't the concept of looking for the spiritual understanding. And that's something that will sometimes bother us in terms of our faith. A lot of times when we're sick, or a lot of times when we are doubting things, we're not looking at it from a spiritual perspective. And we're not even seeing it as a spiritual problem. Okay? Sometimes sickness is legitimately a bacterial sickness or a viral infection, but other times it's something that has a spiritual underlying nature to it. It says within the Bible, and if you guys go to the 2 spiritual power classes, you'll find this, that there's a lot of different things and ailments to us, whether it's psychological or physical, that come from a spiritual root. And we shouldn't look first to see what the earth has to offer, but instead we should look to see what the spiritual realm has to offer. God warns us time and times again about worldly wisdom. Our perception of what we believe is accurate. Our perception of what we believe is accurate versus the reality of the circumstance. In 1 Timothy 1:4, it says, neither give heed to fables or endless genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith. So do. So basically God's saying, don't look to fables, don't look to past traditions, don't look to all these things. Instead, look to me. Look to me for your solutions. Once again, Matthew 13. So let's go to Matthew 13, 54 through 58. And Tristan, our other Matthew reader, if you would read that for us.
And when he was come into his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, insomuch that they were astonished and said, whence hath this man with this wisdom and these mighty works? Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Whence then hath his man all these things? And they were offended in him. But Jesus said unto them, a prophet is not without honor, save in his own country, and in his own house. And he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief.
Okay, so right here we see that we had seen in past instances, Jesus had the power given to him by God to do miracles. In almost every other city leading up to this, he did many miracles, it states. But when he finally got to his own hometown, the first thing that they looked at was not his spiritual power, but what they knew of him in his worldly state. They looked immediately for what he could do as a man, not what he could do as the Son of God. And that caused them unbelief, relying upon reasoning as opposed to spiritual understanding. So according to reason, it had never actually, So looking back in the Old Testament, we can see, however, some people that went against this trend, that relied upon God's wisdom above their own. And it worked out well for them. If we look at Noah, okay, it had never rained prior to that. And God came in saying, it's going to flood for 40 days and 40 nights. Had he not built the ark, we kind of would have been screwed as an entire race. Okay? We can look then at Abraham. Should he have left his home? According to reason, No, but he did anyways. Should Sarah have actually had a child according to human reasoning? No, but she did. Should the seas have ever parted for the Israelites? No. Should the Israelites have starved in the desert? Probably. But contrary to worldly understanding and knowledge, God is able to perform things above and beyond that. So we need to look to him first. 2 more verses. One in the Old Testament. Let's go to Psalms 49, 10 through 15. And if Taylor, you would read that.
Psalm 49, 15.
10 through 15.
For he sees that even the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul for the power of Sheol, for he will receive me.
It's a really weird translation.
It's ESV.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Basically within that, taking Sheol out of this and looking at the conceptual aspects of what it was saying, is it talks about the idea that people that are foolish and senseless, as well as, so basically, for all can see that the wise die, okay? And that their knowledge does not provide them anything after death. How many of you guys ever saw the No Fear shirt where it said, "He who dies with the most toys still dies"? Anybody?
Yeah, just you.
Just me. Andrew is
It exists.
we can rock the 90s. But there used to be a shirt that said that, and it's basically the same thing that Scripture allots, which is this statement that even if you have all the earthly wisdom possible, if you don't have spiritual wisdom, when you die with your knowledge. It's only through a spiritual understanding of God and Jesus that we can actually have an extra attainable afterlife. And that's the knowledge that matters, is that which Jesus tells us matters. So, we're going to quickly look at, or recap, the 4 things that God specifically states in his word that we should look towards when it comes to unbelief. Is 1, being anxious and worrying. 2, being fearful. 3, being doubtful or wavering. And 4, relying upon human understanding as opposed to spiritual knowledge. Those are the 4 things that he directly says cause unbelief within the Bible. But I think the most important thing that we can do comes in Romans 4:21. So Janelle, if you would finish us off in Romans 4:21. And if we can do this, then we don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. And it's sometimes hard to do this.
And being fully persuaded that what he hath promised he is able also to perform.
Okay. Can we bring it back to starting with be strong in faith? I don't know where that is because I apparently didn't write the verse number. But it should be just a couple of verses above that.
Strong faith.
Am I wrong in here?
Is that ESV?
Oh, it might be.
Yeah,
I broke it. I broke it.
Sorry, which one? Romans?
Yeah.
It's 19. Start 19.
Yes.
And being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised he was able also to perform.
Okay, good. Right there. So he staggered not at the promises of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able to perform. Within our lives, we need to look out for the fact that there are things that will cause us to not be fully persuaded. But there's ways that we can do that. We can look directly unto God. We can believe that his actual promises will come true. We can remember that God gave us an inheritance today and a spirit that is not of fear, that we can manifest it whenever we have doubt or wherever we have worry, and that we should just look at those things and study the word and walk out on his promises. So kind of a complicated roundabout way to say that, but there you guys go. That's what I got.
Cool.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
Bye. See you next time.